Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Greetings and peace. What's going on? This is Baraka Blue, and you're tuned into Path and Present podcast. Been a minute. Took a little hiatus, a little break with the podcasting. Not too long, but it's probably been a couple months. I've been doing a little traveling. Been working on a few other projects. But I'm happy to be back and happy to have another podcast for you. This one is with Azhar Usman, who's a wonderful brother, and actually someone who we move in similar circles, and we have many common friends, but we had never actually met in person until a few months ago at the Iman Artist Retreat. And, it was a beautiful meeting because it's one of those things where you know someone and love them and admire them and have a connection with them for years from afar, mutually, but you haven't actually met them in person. So when you finally have that meeting, it's always really profound. So in that weekend after the artist retreat, we sat down and had this conversation. And as many people know, Azhar is a celebrated comedian from Chicago, but he's also a very deep thinker and reflective, philosophically minded, contemplative individual. So we talked about a wide range of things relating to comedy, spirituality, modernity, everything under the sun. So, inshallah, you'll dig it. Oh, I wanted to say before letting you have the podcast that I've had a lot of really positive, beautiful feedback about the podcast, and I appreciate it. Anybody who wants to give a comment, give any feedback, recommend a guest, you can do that. You can hit me up on Twitter at Baraka Blue, like that, or Facebook. And then, of course, you can comment on our iTunes and our SoundCloud as well. So I'm always looking for, new guests, new good people. Anybody, if you have any recommendations of people that you think would be good for the podcast, please do let me know. And then lastly, please do support on Patreon. That's what allows me to set aside the time to do this on a regular basis, semi-regular basis. If you like the podcast and you'd like it to be more consistent or just more frequent, really, I would love to do that. And you can do that by supporting our Patreon, patreon.com/path and present. You can find the link on the SoundCloud and the iTunes. But I think we did about 16 or 17 podcasts in 2017, which is pretty dope. I mean, I don't know. I don't do math. I stuck to language arts. I skipped math class. But, that's like every 3 weeks. So that's pretty good. We stepped it up from the year before, doing it monthly. I took basically the first couple months off of 2018 to work on a few other projects, but I'm back into it. So send us your love, send us your prayer, send us your support financially if you can, and send us your comments and your feedback. It's greatly appreciated. All right, y'all. One love. Peace. I was thinking about the fact, I was talking to Mo earlier about how poetry and stand-up comedy are essentially, they're like the same thing, or they came from the same thing. They're like descendants of the same thing, which is like in the ancestral past, the tribe sitting around the campfire, and somebody stands up to entertain, to tell a story, to make people laugh, to make people cry, to inspire, to sing a song. It's kind of like...
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So we basically have the same art.
Lineage. Same lineage.
Exactly.
We're two genres that spawn from the same seed. I feel that way as well. Jazz, you can add jazz to that. It's a musical dimension of the same real phenomenon, basically. And they talk about the history of jazz and stand-up, specifically as two distinct art forms, being the two indigenous American art forms. Mm-hmm. Some would argue hip hop is a third, and I don't want to get into that whole discussion right now. Mm-hmm. But for a long time, jazz and stand-up comedy have been considered the two indigenous American performing arts. And the history of stand-up and jazz, by the way, is also deeply intertwined. So you'll find a lot of big comics who are huge jazz heads. Cosby, for example, I realize, present controversy aside, just the nature of the art of his comedy. If you notice, he uses his voice, for example, like a jazzy instrument. It's very so even sonically, the quality of his performance and his delivery, he's playing his voice like an instrument in a very jazzy way, and that's known, that's been marked, that's been even commented about academically.
Yeah, that's true. And like so much of stand-up comedy, this is like the hardest thing for me. Like, the thing that separates the amateurs from the pros is delivery. Because I can think of funny stuff all day, but it's like to actually stand up and how you say it and it's the cadence. It's like the cadence, just like how you play.
That's interesting. Well, but I would challenge you on the first part of what you said. I can think of funny stuff all day. I think a lot of non-comics think that, mm-hmm. Right? And of course, it's true. We all think of fun. Every human being on earth thinks of funny stuff all day, or at some point has funny thoughts, right? So Carlin has this great construct where George Carlin says there are 4 levels of funny. The first level of funny is what do you find funny? Mm-hmm. Okay, so everybody has that level because everybody finds something funny. The second level of funny is the phenomenon of the inside joke. So you and your best friend, you and your sibling, you and your mom, you have this like one specific thing based on an experience, a funny incident, whatever, and that becomes sort of the inside joke, and you both find it funny. So that's level 2. Level 3 is what a comedian does, which is they get up in front of strangers and just tell jokes, share what they find funny, and not only have their friends found it funny, but these strangers are also finding it funny, which is a higher level. And then the 4th level, the highest level, is not only is it so funny that you find it funny and your friends find it funny and strangers find it funny, strangers who hear you tell the joke, in fact, find it so funny that they go and tell others. And that's the 4th level of funny. Mm-hmm. So writing jokes that are that funny, that are not just like, I think of funny stuff all the time. So yeah, but is it funny enough that if crafted into a piece of material and shared with random strangers, would they find it so funny that they would go and tell others? Mm-hmm. That's really the goal, right, of writing great material. So, but that being said, you're an artist, you're a writer, so I wouldn't be surprised if you were actually thinking of comedic ideas that are super hilarious. But you're right, then the next piece becomes how do you translate that into the words and then, of course, also the performance, yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar, actually, because, like, you're also, like, just having talked to you, I know you have, like, a lot of deep philosophical reflections and commentary and thoughts. Stuff that could easily be made into a poem. But, there's a difference between having, like, poetic, deep thoughts and, like, being able to present that in a way that transmits that to someone else. You know what I mean?
100%, bro.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say, you remember that scene in, you've seen Chappelle's Block Party? Mm-hmm. He's sitting on the piano and then he sort of looks in the camera. He's like, look, here's the thing. Every comedian wants to be a musician. Mm-hmm. Every musician wants to be a comedian, right? So I feel that. And I would say in my case, not even like a musician, but more like a lyricist or just a poet. And I do write. I write amateur poetry in the sense of like the way you might, exactly the way you just said you think of jokes, Yeah. So, I love poetry. I've always loved poetry. I wouldn't say I was never all into it, like wanting to be an aspiring poet. I just never felt that pull. I never felt that path. But I do have this tremendous love for poetry. And I've spent a lot of time. It's no secret. A big theme of your podcast has to do with Sufism and the Sufi teaching and Sufi, the Sufi path. And so along that way, I've also kind of been affiliated with and flirting around the world of Sufi teachers for the last couple of decades of my life, So along the way, you discover a lot of poetry. You can't really mess with the Sufis without having to, contend with the fact that they have oceans and oceans of Sufi love.
It's like Sufism is synonymous with poetry.
Yeah, man.
In the way that no other tradition, no even other mystical tradition is.
That is correct. And my parents are originally from India. Mm-hmm. So I spent time with Indian, Sufi sheikhs and murshids, peers. They call them peers. I'm sure you know that. And Pakistani peers, and the ones who are, specifically the ones who are into Sufism, if they're from the subcontinent, invariably they're going to know not only Urdu but also Farsi.
Yeah.
And the oceanic treasure of spiritual, mystical poetry in the Islamic 8 languages just begins with Arabic and then extends into Farsi and then has this oceanic output. There's more literature on religion and Islam and Sufi mysticism and poetry in the Urdu language on earth than there is in Persian and Arabic combined.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the Urdu saints they went ballistic. 'Cause the Mughal Empire also was, Urdu was the formal language of the Mughal Empire.
Right.
And there was a flourishing of so much deep metaphysical, mystical, and spiritual thought, spiritual schools, the confrontation of Hindu mysticism and Hindu metaphysics with Sufi metaphysicians and Sufi mystics produced this incredible, just a whole universe of literature, of philosophy, of theosophy that sadly, most people don't even know exists anymore, let alone is it something that is deeply explored and studied and maintained. It's one of those added to the list of dying arts on planet Earth. But if you can find somebody who has tapped into that world, oh my God, there are.
Yeah, and we forget that these are still, you talk about Persia, talk about, Pakistan. These are still bardic civilizations. You could say, yeah, maybe it's dying out, but the previous generation, I remember I heard a story of an Iranian scholar who went to Pakistan and he visited the tomb of a saint and he stayed there really late, and so basically he couldn't get a taxi back into town afterwards, but there was a tuk-tuk guy pulling a little thing, right? So he
what you call him, a tuk-tuk guy?
Tuk-tuk guy.
Okay.
So he gets on the little tuk-tuk and he doesn't speak any Urdu. And this guy, so they're trying to communicate, and then he realizes, oh, you speak Farsi. And so he said the whole time back to the town for a half hour, the tuk-tuk driver is reciting Farsi poetry, Sufi poetry too.
Yeah, man.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, man.
So it's just
I've had so many of those experiences around. Well, this is the story of whom again?
This was a story I heard of. So I would say Nasser tell about his time.
Yeah. I often will have encounters like this. The 2016-17 equivalent of this is, getting in an Uber somewhere on Earth with some person who has some connection to, they're Iranian, they're Afghani. A lot of Afghans also speak Farsi, and if they have a Sufi inclination, or more often than not, lineage. A lot of people, their grandparents are really into tasawwuf, and they have, maybe a family sheikh or whatever. And then, I can't tell you, I've lost count how many times it's happened. And Urdu, my God, Urdu poetry, don't get me started, man. I'm in love with some of that stuff. It's just, and I'm such a beginner. That's the other thing about it, right? When you know that your exposure to a particular field is literally elementary at best, but you know enough to know that there are living master postdoc level, that's kind of there's something exciting about that to me.
Yeah,
I enjoy that.
And I heard somebody say that the more you know is the bigger your the flame. So for instance, if you know a little bit, you have a little candle, or a little match, then a candle. Then you learn a lot. You got a bigger bonfire, but all it does is illuminate the space that you don't know. You more light to see. That's right. This goes on forever.
Yeah, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. It's it's a cliche, but the reason it's true is because it's knowledge is infinite. Knowledge is the domain of God, ultimate knowledge, right? Allahu alim. Allah ala kulli shay'in alim. God has knowledge over everything. I remember this Sufi sheikh blew my mind one time, breaking this thing down, the notion that God's knowledge is infinite. Okay, the way he explained it, he said, so what do we mean by that? God's knowledge is infinite. That means that within the knowledge of God, that which God knows, because we have to talk about epistemology. What does it mean to know? Right? This is, I would say, the crisis of the age is epistemology. People people are debating morality, which is a sideshow. Morality is a stupid debate because morality only comes out as just derivative from what your starting points of the nature of reality is.
Yes. Yeah, that's really a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, so all 99.999% of discussions on Earth today that are supposedly about religion, which end up becoming morality debates, have missed the point. Let's talk about what really is real. What are we talking about?
What is existence?
Yeah, what is
happening?
What is the nature of being itself? Exactly. So I would say that actually there are 4 questions. What is the nature of being? What is the origin of being itself? What is the true nature of human consciousness? What is the purpose of it all? And what happens to me after we die? There's only 4 real questions. Everything else is commentary. All religion, all spirituality, all mysticism, all philosophy is just commenting on, debating these nuances. But these 4 questions are at the heart of it all. And these are the 4 things that we want to talk about. All right. Jumping back into it, God's knowledge encompasses everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does it mean to know? So once we go through those definitions, okay, now we understand, okay, that God's knowledge, that is to say, what is knowable, that is what knowledge is, is an infinite universe of possible being. Okay. And infinity, as opposed to absoluteness, are the archetypal representations of time and space. Time is infinite, space is finite. Or space is absolute. Sorry, not finite, but absolute. So God's infinitude and God's absoluteness are mirrored, if you will, without being blasphemous, by the phenomenon, by the dimensionality of so-called time and space.
And those are woven. Like space and time is a continuum.
Space-time is a continuum.
And the absolute is one.
Right. Exactly right. And this duality of which one is it? And where is it? This is the whole brilliance and the beauty of the Heisenberg principle, right? The uncertainty principle. Everything is, you cannot both attribute speed and location because that's impossible. If there's speed that's in movement, you cannot locate it. I asked Sheikh Hamza Yusuf one time, I asked him this off the record, but he answered it in a way that allows me to share it publicly. I was like, look, Sheikh Hamza, tell me something, man, off the record, between you and me. Do you believe that the Isra and the Mi'raj, the mystical night journey of the messenger of God, the ascent into heaven, was a physical bodily journey or not? This is a big debate, right? And he said, I can only answer your question with a question. And I said, what is that? Is light a particle or a wave? Think about that.
Okay.
I mean, that's back to the Heisenberg principle, uncertainty. You cannot, the question itself is absurd.
Right.
You're trying to...
It's neither and it's both, and only witnessing it makes it in one place. Like
correct.
That whole thing.
It's reductionist question.
Yeah.
It's a question that assumes a reductionist worldview and a scientific material worldview that is divorced from the essence of what we've been talking about from the beginning, which is a spiritual starting point. What is the true nature of reality? The world is not, at its ultimate level, nothing more than bits and particles of physical matter. It's truth and its secret and its reality is far beyond any notion of so was it a bodily journey or not? Like the question is an elementary childish question.
It always strikes me as I mean, and the part of the hadith about the Isra is that the Prophet ﷺ's pillow was still warm when he returned.
Allah.
You know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's a mystical experience.
And it's obvious, man. Like, the fact that... And also, the other thing is, it's all a mystical experience.
You know what's weird to me, man, nobody talks about? I'm sorry. You continue your line of thought. The Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa sahbihi wa sallam, tasliman kathira. Latter generations like us struggle to talk about his haqiqah, his reality, because it's so difficult to reconcile the utterly infinite metaphysical cosmic principle upon which the haqiqatul Muhammadiyya, the archetypal reality of being itself, light, the Nur Muhammadiyya, which is on the one hand absolute truth, reconcile that with the quote-unquote lived bodily human experience. It's almost like this Christian problem that they run into where they try to deify a human being and forget that he was also a person when he was here on earth. He lived a physical life. In that regard, so many amazing details from the Prophet's life that are preserved and recorded and passed down that upon any level of just contemplation and consideration are so utterly humanizing and beautiful. Like, for instance, when he was going through what we would call in modern day, terms like a period of depression, and even contemplated suicide, throwing himself off a mountain. Allahumma salli ala nabi. So where does that waswasa come from, right? That's the devil. That's the ego. That's projection. That's doubt. That's fear. That's all those utterly relatable human things that, because of the discourse that has kind of emerged, that does not deify but quasi, exaggerates and embellishes in the interest of love. It's based on love. It's not coming from a bad place. But and also the opposite is dangerous, because that's what the opposite, when the pendulum swings to the opposite extreme. That's what some of our misguided, quote unquote brothers. I would say some of these people, quite frankly, are human devils that have hijacked religion in the name of religion to destroy religion. And I don't want to call them all Wahhabis and things like that. People do that stuff. I'll just say that the aqidah, the actual precise creedal doctrinal beliefs adopted by some misguided cults and misguided threads within our community is one thing, but there's simply no denying the fact that when whatever philosophy and creed you've adopted leads you, astaghfirullah, to disrespect the messenger of God, to not cultivate love for the messenger of God, to not understand the centrality of love for the messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in your lived spiritual path and experience, then that's sufficient to know that something is wrong.
Yeah, and these people, they're trapped in the horizontal, like you said. Like they don't experience that Haqiqa Muhammadiyan, the Muhammadan reality. Like, I heard something, there was one master that said, he said the difference between with those, people of that, anti-intellectual, anti-spiritual tradition within Islam, he said, is that we say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. They say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammadan kana Rasulullah. He was.
Yeah, they don't understand. It's a misperception of. Back to my point about the importance.
It
of
all comes to that, right?
Everything is based on epistemology, man.
And it's like think about and this is a beauty too that needs to be articulated, because people don't really understand. They're like, what does this historical personage really have to do with me right now? But it's like, no, in every tradition, like you think about, we have Haqiqa Muhammadiyya, the Christians, they have this idea of, that Christic reality, that Christ consciousness.
Yes, Christ consciousness, absolutely.
And then even like in the Buddhist tradition, they also have this idea of like the Buddha nature, which exists at the center of everyone's being.
Enlightenment, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's like, and as we understand, is that all of the prophets, that light is one source. Like, you know what I mean?
Correct.
It's all facets. You know what I mean?
100%.
It, like, literally, that's what, Ibn Arabi uses. Fusus al-Hikam is like facets, a fast in a ring. The Fusus al-Hikam, each chapter is about a prophet being containing a different, like, dominant virtue, but it's all like a different, you could think of it as like a different color of the color spectrum, but it's all the pure light. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's just filtered through different lenses,
100%.
which is
That's exactly right.
But I mean, and we live in a time where there's just so much, and that's a good point. What you're saying, like whenever I have conversation with people, one thing that I'm really aware of is like we have to define terms.
Oh yeah, I'm an agnostic. You know what agnosticism is? Agnostic, not agnostic. Agnosticism, IG, aka igtheism, which I think is a corny word. But agnosticism is a school of thought, if you will, or a way of organizing one's relationship with such conversations such as the ones we're having. And the starting point of an agnostic is to say, look, I refuse to have any conversation about any matters pertaining to God, religion, spirituality, using any of the terminology of God, soul, good, evil, heaven, hell, judgment, morality. We're not going to talk any of that till we first start with a conversation about defining these terms. Because there's so much crosstalk. Everybody's using the same terms to mean different things, slightly different terms. It's back to what we were talking about yesterday, about the nature of language and precision of terms and meaning, right?
Yeah.
I'm convinced. I'm completely and utterly and totally convinced that this is where the conversation is going at the adult table on Earth, among intelligent, researchers.
And that's
scientists.
why one of them said one of the scholars said that when he meets someone who says, "I don't believe in God," he responds, "I don't believe in the same God you don't believe in
either." Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what also and so I think and lack of ability to define terms and just throwing around terminology without defining terms specifically and making sure we're actually meaning the same thing. When I say, Rumi has this beautiful thing too, where he talks about, an Ethiopian, a Greek, an Arab, and a Persian. They all sat at a table, and they asked, the waiter, "I want this." In their own language, they said, "I'd like this, I'd like this, I'd like this." And then they started arguing, like, "No, I want this. No, I want this." And they're arguing about what they want to order. But then when the dish came, it was grapes. And they had all ordered grapes in their own language. You know what I mean? They just thought. So in certain senses, maybe we're using different terms, but we mean the same thing. Or maybe we're using the same term, but we mean different things. And it indicates sloppy thinking.
Yes.
Like it's just a lack of discernment.
Yes.
And it's funny too, I was thinking about this because, if you go in certain spaces, there's like terms, like for the whole like postmodernist, like activist thing, there's certain terms, like a checklist, like problematic and intersectionality and you know what I mean, like a whole range of.
I don't want to be. You know what the thing is? I feel like I'm going to become more. I want to improve at being more understanding, empathetic, and respectful of that discourse.
Yeah.
Because I can kind of sometimes be dismissive of it, and I don't mean it in a bad way, not intentionally anyway. But I can see how that would be received as unempathetic, because I think everybody's ultimately just we're all trying our best.
Yeah. People are trying to figure it out.
Yeah, people are at different points, exactly. And there are plenty of things I can look to my own self, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, last week, where it's like, oh my God, I was completely missed the point on that thing. Well, if I could see that looking backwards, at my own self, who am I to stand in judgment of anybody else?
Right. And for sure, hopefully, if you grow in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, you're going to look at
back on today and be like,
what
was the guy talking about? Exactly. So, and that's our lived experience. We just don't kind of take note of that to realize the absurdity of ever standing in judgment over another person. Because at any moment in time, it's just a snapshot, one frame of the movie of their life. You have no idea where you're at in the movie. But here's what I wanted to say about this is related to where we started about the God has knowledge over everything. So the Sheikh says, look, time and space, right? Infinitude and absoluteness. So when we talk about God has knowledge over everything, that means God's knowledge encompasses everything that ever was, everything that is, and everything that will ever be. And far more impressive in his way, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that his knowledge also encompasses everything that never was. Everything that is not.
Yes.
And everything
that will never be. Allah Akbar.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah.
I said something like that.
Inna Allah ala kulli shayin alim. God has knowledge over all. It is literally infinite ocean without shore.
Imam Ghazali too. Imam Ghazali said something which really hit me powerfully. He said, in Jannah, he goes, there's levels of Jannah. He said, for the common folk, the Jannah is like what's described of the pleasures in the garden. So he goes, but for the elect, that paradise is gazing upon Allah without a veil. And at each moment, you could say like your aperture is more wide, so you're able to take in more forever, and it never ends. You never can reach the depth. You can never say, I got it all.
Yeah, I got it all. It's impossible.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I had this one. It's interesting you say that. Beyond stars, beyond ours, beyond planets and spheres, beyond quarks and quasars, beyond far, beyond near, beyond space, beyond time, beyond races and climes, beyond what we beyond beings and signs, beyond letters, beyond words, beyond spoken and heard, beyond everything that will and will never recur. Beyond every number and shape you can ever conjure, beyond,
Allah.
ad infinitum absurd.
Allah. You wrote that? Yeah. Oh my God, it's beautiful, man. Mashallah. That's gorgeous.
And that's why it's like,
that's how I feel, brother.
Rumi has that line. He says, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." The way of the true arifin is just
like, what is going on here?
And that's why people faint, and that's why people just go majdu, because it's so beyond, and it's so beautiful, and you can never encapsulate it. You can never speak it. You can never even talk about it. Imam Ghazali also says, anytime you talk about the realities of dhawq, you necessarily mix truth with falsehood. Because
this gets us to an interesting point, bro. Listening to your podcast, letting Lord sitting here, being on your podcast, speaking about these matters that are, these are the most precious gems and jewels of our tradition, and not just our tradition, by extension of human knowledge, a collected wisdom. And there's always been a tension within our quote unquote religion, and I'm putting that word in quotes for a reason, because it's my belief back to terminology. We need to define these terms, okay?
And that's a big
The world is full today of what I would call, if we talk about fake news, the world is full of fake religion, okay? And including Muslims, by the way. Hashtag fake religion. And by the way, Muslims are in denial, by and large. In my judgment, and God forgive me if I'm wrong, but in my assessment, my view, my perspective based on, I've traveled a lot of the world and talked to a lot of people and been heavily involved at times, and remain at least connected to, a lot of Muslim leaders and activists, thinkers and intellectuals and academics and artists and entertainers and people who are at the forefront of making culture and policy and, thought leaders. In those spheres and in those circles, my observation has been that there's a lot now on earth passing for what is so-called Islam, quote unquote, but in fact is really nothing more than Islam going through as a religion on earth the same thing that the Quran and the Prophet of God told us and tell us happened to every religion before Islam. In other words, the devil comes in through human devils and demon devils, jinn and human beings. And they are slaves and they are servants of the devil, Satan himself. And their job is nothing more, nothing less.
Satan, that's a term we should define.
We should define
it. You feel me?
Yeah. What do we mean? A specific individual? Do we mean an archetypal phenomenon, an infernal energy, negative, darkness, evil?
Because what did the Prophet say? It says Shaitan flows through the veins of the children of Adam like blood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and every human being has a devil assigned to them. And you read Screwtape Letters, I'm sure, right? Oh my God, that book is incredible, dude. But back to the moral of the story, Satan on all those levels of meaning. I believe in archetypal reality and also a created
darkness,
being,
that which calls away from the light.
That's correct. Actually, to try to get you to doubt eternal truth. This is a very profound insight I learned from a great sheikh. He attributed it to Imam al-Muhasibi, rahimahullah, ancient Sufi wisdom teaching from Orthodox religion. In other words, not goofy Sufi stuff. And I mess with some of that goofy Sufi stuff too. But I'm just very clear about what the difference is between the value and the weight of the teaching. This is like straight classical orthodoxy. There's only 4 types of insinuations that arise in your heart. 4 suggestions, 4 notions, 4 types. That's it. And they come from each comes from a corresponding source. You've heard about this. The first one is the desire or the inclination, the prompting to disobey God, for example, to violate a moral law, a moral code of behavior, ethical, moral, spiritual, whatever it is, on whatever level. Even let's just say that is your own moral compass. Okay, but to violate that thing, that prompting is coming from your own ego. It's just enough. It's just your own desires, appetites. In other words, the devil's not trying to get you to sin. Your own ego's doing hella good job doing that on its own, all right? The second inclination is the desire to obey God, to resist that, and that is from the angels. The third inclination is doubt about eternal truth in whatever form, and that is from the devil. And the fourth is utter and complete and absolute conviction without doubt about eternal truth, and that is from God himself. So they're called khawatir nafsani, khawatir malakani, khawatir shaitani, wa khawatir rahmani, or khawatir rabbani. So that teaching, I think, is so helpful, man, because it puts in context our own experiences moment to moment and explodes this myth that somehow that's the devil that's trying to get you to sin. The devil doesn't care if you sin or don't sin. The devil's game, his long game, is to get you to renounce faith and leave this world doubting that there is a loving, eternal God waiting for you on the other side. That's his whole game. That's all the devil cares about in the end of the day. Sin becomes a path to that insofar as it desensitizes a person to believe. Because it's like you don't want to reconcile, like, yo, if there really is a God, how could I be so flagrantly out of integrity? So after a while, you start just believing in the way you're living rather than believing in God and realizing you're out of integrity. And it would be so much better, infinitely better for all of modern human beings to simply accept in one breath, yo, God is real, and may God please forgive me. Everybody's saved. The error is to keep denying our own sin, to live in denial of sin because we're so ashamed and embarrassed. And once we deny sin, that we're living sinfully, we'll never ask for forgiveness. Yeah. So this is the game that modern man is playing now, with our soul. If modern human beings are, where's the default state right now? We're playing a dangerous game.
Bro.
It's chaos. It's spiritual chaos.
Because, I think a lot of what happened in traditional societies, like, for instance, when I spent time in Bali, which is predominantly Hindu, or when I spent time in the Amazon jungle, which is like shamanic, indigenous, or when I spent time in West Africa, in like the Gambia, these are like societies which are in many ways still pre-modern and still in a sacred universe where people don't question, people haven't been introduced to ideas which
fundamental doubt, right, that have converted.
And people experience the divine. Whether it's like a Balinese man who's like in his rice field, like he is just like sanctified because he is just contemplating the signs, and the shaman in the Amazon, like people are there's a natural urge to give offerings and to pray and to commune with the spirit and the transcendent and to be aware of the unseen. And the thing is, either this is a natural human inclination across time and space because it's real, these things are real, the unseen is real, or it's a primitive, childish illusion before we awoken to scientific rationalist materialism. Do you ever feel when you get up in front of a crowd that you don't really want to be funny? You want to like explore ideas that are meaningful to you, and you feel like it's less fun. It's less important to be funny and more important to like use a platform to discuss.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think it also kind of just depends on the day of the week.
Yeah, just your feeling.
It's a mood, it's a mood thing. I think that when I feel that, I feel conflicted because I don't feel like that's right. I feel that I'm cheating. I'm cheating because my responsibility as a comic is to make the audience laugh. That's the job definition. So if I'm more interested in exploring ideas than I am in making them laugh, then it's almost kind of like
do a TED Talk, bro.
Yeah, they're not. It's not fair to them. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but I justify it, or I give myself the license to do that because it's the only way to get to the promised land I'm trying to get to, which is to be able to do both. Yeah. Make people, think. The gold standard to me is make them laugh in the room, think on the way home. Mm. The gold standard to me is to do stand-up comedy that is both timely, but also timeless. You could listen to a Richard Pryor bit right now about police brutality, and it's like it was done last week. Mm. I mean, that's incredible. Mm-hmm. You can listen to pretty much any George Carlin commentary on American politics or culture, and it's like he's commenting on Trump America. Mm-hmm. Bill Hicks, same thing. So all my idols in comedy are people whose material, I mean, like I saw Chappelle do that set on SNL, the one that just won the Emmy. Immediately, the night I saw it, like the night it happened, I was like, people are going to be watching this in 40 years. Right. If the world is still around,
So social commentary, like smart comedy, that's what you're into.
Incisive, intelligent, and what is the essence of great comedy? Let's talk about stand-up in particular. What is the essence of great stand-up comedy?
You're asking me?
I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think it is.
For me,
who's your favorite comedian of all time and right now? First of all, are you a fan of stand-up?
Yes. Okay. But I'm like not a hardcore fan. I'm a casual, but I like it. Like,
I got you.
My first initiation was my dad had the VHS of Eddie Murphy Delirious. And when I was like 12 years old, I memorized every word.
You memorized Delirious?
Yeah.
You still know it till today, probably.
I know a lot of it, bro. Wow. Like the bit about... we got some ice cream. I got some ice cream. I got some ice cream. And you don't have none because your daddy is an alcoholic. Bro, all those. Oh my God. That's how I learned like half of the cuss words in the dictionary. It's like I had no business listening.
Funny. That's a big. Is that also the special where he does the impression of Cosby and Pryor?
No, I think that was Raw.
Tell him to go.
Yeah, that was Raw, which I saw later, but
which is so interesting that he was dissing Cosby so hard at that time.
Bro, he does so many funny things.
Prior,
yeah, maybe he did talk about Cosby, but bro,
he's. I forget what's
something about like people defending Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder's a musical genius. Because he did Stevie Wonder jokes, and then black people got so bad.
So funny. Michael Jackson looking for him, right? Wants to fight him. That's so funny. He did that stuff by then in his early 20s.
Yeah. In a freaking hot red leather suit.
I think he was 21 when he made his first special. That's,
insane.
I don't think people outside the show business can really appreciate and understand how insane that is. Mm. Even, to be honest with you, I don't think anybody out of stand-up can appreciate how insane. To have that level of unrivaled, unparalleled, unprecedented success. Yeah. That young, bro.
Just killing it.
Wow. It's utterly incredible, man. I think he's in a category of one in that regard as a comedian. Nobody else.
Like, for me, I appreciate, like, Carlin, Richard Pryor, newer comedians.
Who's your favorite?
Like, I really like Cat Williams when he's on. Like, when he's killing, like, who kills like that? But, he's not consistent. That's the thing.
Right.
But, like, that thing about weed, dude, that's the funniest.
That's incredible. Come on, bro. That's incredible. Then you've seen Lion in the Zoo? The Cat Williams bit about Lion in the Zoo? Oh, my God. It's incredible.
The Everyday I'm Hustling, how he came out to that? Like, come on, bro. Yeah,
he's amazing. I agree. I'm a fan of his.
But the point is, like, for me, what I think about comedy is, like, okay, you have to say something that resonates with people, but they haven't really formulated it before. Like, what's funny is when you say, when you XYZ, and people are like, yeah, I do know. Actually, I never really thought about that. And so you're like illuminating something, you're like lighting a little bit more of the fire to illuminate what, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But also, like, a lot of comedy is in the space between you're not really supposed to say that in polite company. Mm-hmm. So but you can't go too far. Because if you just offend people, people are gonna be like, "This is whack."
Right.
But if you're just like,
it's got to be
too vanilla.
It's got to be acceptably naughty. It's got to push the limit of like.
And that's what I was gonna ask too. Is like, do you feel? Because I know a lot of comedians. You could tell they're very intelligent people, very thoughtful, very observant. And it seems like a lot of comedians actually tend to be people that are both in and out of society. Like, for instance, people who are in but out of like the in group. So they have a vantage point. Like, so, you know, traditionally it was like there was a lot of Jewish comedians because they're white, but they're not white. You know what I mean? And then black comedians because you're American, but you're black. You know what I mean? So you have this outsider. And then, like, even I think about Louis C.K., who's like just looks like a average white dude, but this is Mexican. He's Mexican. So he like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's
his native tongue was Spanish.
You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
So, but I do feel like a lot of these smart comedians dumb down because it's like common denominator, man. Like it's hard to get everybody. Not everyone's gonna follow you. It's like it's easier to just tell jokes about bodily functions because everyone is kind of gets about that. Yeah. Like, do you feel like that tension?
I get. Well, so man, we've opened up so many interesting dimensions and threads regarding stand-up. Right. So one thing I would say is let's get back to the thing you said about one thing they kind of all have in common is they, you ever notice that? And then you're like, yeah, I have noticed. So sort of the phenomenon of identifying, naming, and talking about a shared experience, realization, idea, thought that has never been articulated before, basically.
But that's common to human experience.
That's right. That's what it's shared. Yeah. It's a shared, commonly, widely shared experience that nobody's really ever pointed out explicitly. That's one aspect of it. Let's come back to that in a second. And then separately, you mentioned this other point about Louis C.K. and
Insider, outsider,
the duality of kind of having both points of view, and then being able to kind of exploit that, if you will, by almost like holding up a mirror. But then that led to the idea of the dumbing down, the problem of having to dumb down. So these are kind of, to me, three distinct subjects. Right? The dumbing down thing is easy. To me, that's really just a function of commercial motivation.
Yeah, it's true.
You're the greatest rapper of all time. Guess what? You want to have a club banger on the album because you want it to get radio play, because you want it to be popping off in the clubs. So people will know you exist and buy your full album and appreciate the artistry and the incredible lyrical genius on the rest of the tracks. But you still got to put out the dun 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 dun.
100%.
Booty's got to bounce in order to get the fame and the money of the showbiz thing. That's the comedy equivalent, dick jokes. I hate to be, crass, but that's the phenomenon. So to me, the comedian, just the artist, each individual person has to make their own artistic choice of how and what they want to do to check that box. There are plenty of comics who just never do. Like, they just are in their own lane, So I think really it becomes a function of finding your lane, finding your frequency, finding your tone, finding your space and the way in which you want to do this thing called stand-up, and figuring out how to address that. Because it's not really about being crass or whatever. It's really about making it commercially viable. How will it be relatable at a mass level? And by the way, some comics simply never will, right? They have a cult following. They have an underground following. Just like there's some great rappers, great poets, great filmmakers.
Rappers.
Some of the greatest films are not widely known, but they're known among the world's greatest. So it's about taste, and it gets a little bit into classism and elitism and all. Yeah. But all that aside,
the best rappers, like technically, you can't appreciate them unless you are a rapper.
Correct.
Like, and so you can't
even comics. It's a phenomenon. Yeah. Comics. Yeah. Oh, he's a comics comic, right? I've been working at the Cellar now. I think I mentioned that to you, man. This is the biggest honor of my career. So I'm at the Comedy Cellar for the last few months, and I'm getting to see comics. David Tell has a cult following because he had that show on what was that? I think it was Comedy Central during the '90s. Insomniac, and so he's got fan base, but the level of his mastery of the craft of stand-up comedy is it's out of this world, man. Greer Barnes, you probably never heard of Greer Barnes. Mm-hmm. Greer Barnes, man, I saw him open for Seinfeld when I started doing comedy in like 03, 04. And this dude opens for CK, he opens for Rock, he opens for Seinfeld. Like, he is a comedy genius. But nobody's not well known. At least not yet, you know. True comics comic, man. And there's a bunch of those kind of guys in stand-up. Right. But the simple fact is, these are artistic decisions and choices that people make. Yes.
And they're not dumbing it down. They're like doing
they're not
some
dumbing
elite
it down at all.
Stuff.
Correct. Now, going back to the first question about the observational aspect, right? This is an Azhar Usman original, what I'm about to share with you, which is a thought that I had, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about what makes something funny. You know, what is a great joke? What do all my favorite comedians and favorite type of stand-up have in common? I'm really trying to get to it. And there's a great book, by the way. Though I'm not a fan of Sigmund Freud in general, many of his overarching psychological theories, I don't think that, you know, it's wise to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sure. I mean, he definitely has some insights. Mm-hmm. And so he wrote a book called Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Fascinating book, yeah. Oh. So building on some of the ideas that he proposes, but really my own insight as to like the nature of the relationship between the mind. So the mind, let's say, by that term, back to terminology, we mean the intellectual dimension of the human experience, okay? And the intellectual dimension as not only the brain, like as a physiological phenomenon, but the notion of thought, yes, as opposed to emotion or feeling, which is the domain of the heart, as opposed to physicality and bodily feeling, which is the body, as opposed to even spiritual feelings, which is the spirit, as opposed to psychic, which is like kind of like the soul. No, we're talking about the mind. Okay, in the domain of the mind, you have sort of like layers. So to borrow some psychological terminology, imagine the mind as sort of like the rational, aware level of the mind. Let's call that the discursive mind or the conscious mind. Mm-hmm. And then right behind the conscious mind, you have that kind of first layer. Let's call that the first level of subconscious mind, of the subconscious mind. So you have one layer of subconscious thought. Most people don't just have you and I sitting here, we're talking. That's one level. The listener is listening. They're listening to the words I'm saying. But maybe there's right behind it, there's like this other thought, that's the question that's burning in their mind. Well, what do you mean by that? Or maybe they have to go to the bathroom. So like, I got to go find a bathroom. They're still listening, but there's the processing that second layer. Yeah. Then there's the subconscious mind, the layer right behind that. So maybe the guy is driving, he's got to go to the bathroom, and he's thinking to himself, but I know I'm 10 minutes away from home, maybe I can hold it, but there's a spot over there, I can just go take the exit. So now he's also processing yet another layer. And then, of course, a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. So you have all these layers of subconscious thought, behind which ultimately is just infinite unconscious, right? You can call it, again, by so many different names, the realm of the mumkin al-wujud, the realm of possible being, which is infinite. You can call it the infinite unconscious, Carl Jung. You can call it the, limbo, the infinite raw unconscious in Inception. Whatever term you want to put on it, the point is at some point the mind slips into this infinitude. What does a great comic do? A great comic basically introduces a premise or a thought or an idea about an experience that is commonly shared. And then instead of just talking about it at the conscious level or at the level of the discursive mind, reaches up, so to say, into like 3 or 4 layers of subconscious deep. And then pulls out that thought and then rips it down and sort of presents it at the level of the conscious mind. And what a great comic will do is be able to ascertain a very common series of steps. Like if you had this thought, then you would also have this thought. And then you would have this other thought, and then you'd probably have this other thought, right? And it's the ability to basically just very logically draw the almost like unexpected and absurd dominoes.
Yeah. To connect dots that others haven't connected.
Correct. And or if they have, they've done it unconsciously. So really the magic is sort of like pulling that thought that everybody has had. This is your point about, and what a lot of times people, when a joke is killing, people are laughing viscerally from the stomach, dying, right? Just belly laugh. what's going on there is this idea of like, oh my God, that's so true. People actually say that. That's so true, right? So they actually
because if you
thought.
think, if you're saying something and it's like, yeah, that's so true, that's crazy,
Exactly.
But then it's funny. But if say you say something and I'm like, no, I don't think that's true.
I don't agree. Right.
Then it's like
it's not funny.
It's not funny.
Correct.
It's just like I don't see where you're going there.
Correct. So the internal logic of a joke has to work, and it's a very interesting phenomenon of what makes a joke work.
It has to be true.
What are the mechanics of a joke? Jokes also have structure. Every single joke that exists, everything that's ever made you laugh, has had two parts. The first part is called the setup. The second part is called the punchline, right? Even a guy walking down the street slips on a banana peel. The setup is he's walking down the street, you don't expect nothing to happen. He slips on a banana peel, that's the punchline. Everything that's ever made you laugh could ultimately be sort of like put into this framework, into this structure. So what makes it funny? What makes a punchline work? The essence of comedy is surprise. That's the essence of all comedy, is that you don't see it coming, quote unquote. If you see the punchline coming, it's not funny. So the essence of comedy is actually surprise, okay? And a great punchline is kind of has a couple of different features to it. Number one is it still works. It follows some internal logic because the premise, you could see the premise. The first part of it, the punchline is justified by the premise. It's undergirded and supported by the logic of where the premise could go, and yet at the same time, it's surprising in some way because you didn't think of it, you didn't see it coming. So it has these two features. A great punchline, like the perfect punchline, if you will, is where the entire audience gets the joke at the same moment, on the same word. So what you notice a lot of times is you just have a setup and then you start telling the rest of the punchline. Some people get it right away, start laughing, ha ha ha, and then as more lines go, more words, and by the time you're done with the sentence, everybody's gotten the joke now. But that still could be a great joke. But what makes a truly great joke is, it's quiet, setup, punchline starts, bada, boom, and then everybody gets it at the same word. That's a perfectly constructed joke.
That's amazing. I've never thought of this, but when you were saying that, it made me think of the word wujud, wajada, the root.
Discovery.
Which it means existence.
Actually means being.
Being and existence. Or it means a lot. So it has all these so it means being, existence. It means finding.
Discover.
To find, to discover. To disclose. And it also means ecstasy, joy, bliss.
Wajad.
So when everyone finds in that moment, there's a bliss. It's bliss.
That's beautiful.
We all there's a
release.
There's a release, and it's because we all find, and so it's like this,
it's
and
beautiful.
the dope, and like comedy is interesting because it's experiential. It's a dope. It's like because, and that's what's deep about also like poetry, is because other types of communication, like if I said, please go get me the red notebook, all you have to understand is please get me the red notebook. If you understand all the words, you can do it and you can bring it back, and that's successful communication, 100%.
Yes.
But if I write a poem and you understand every word perfectly, but it doesn't affect you, it doesn't move you, it doesn't rearrange something inside of you, it doesn't hit you, it doesn't combine that finding, that ecstasy, that or even joy, pain, anything, but it doesn't make you feel, it's failed. Not like 5%, but 100%. It's which is like comedy. If
very binary.
It's just like this, like, the whole thing of like, you tell a joke, everyone laughs, but that one dude who's like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's like you try to explain it to him, it's not funny anymore.
You can't
because
you
can't separate the joke, the message from the medium.
Correct.
How it's said from what it's said.
Oh my God!
Just
if we open this door of the message is the medium is the message. You know about this, Marshall McLuhan? You know, I've never heard of Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan is like one of the greatest media theorists of the 20th century, and he coined this term famously, this phrase: "The medium is the message." It's actually exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase, but I don't know the root
this
of
is
it.
a whole nother podcast, man. I mean, television. I've thought about this for the last decade, man. Like television specifically as a medium. Also, when you say you love podcasting as a dope medium, right?
Yeah.
I totally get what you mean by that. Because each medium, the medium is the message.
Right.
Okay? Television as is a reductionist medium. It reduces everything to slogans, to phrases, to a logo, to a jingle, to an image, to a picture, to a particular tone. Fox News, and you hear those two words, Fox News, and it's like you already know what you're gonna get. The medium is the message. Okay, podcasting, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. It's a medium for deep, meaningful, exploratory, unrushed, research supported, time to breathe, reflective, contemplative types of communication and conversations. That doesn't exist in the culture, man.
No.
So podcasting is this dark horse, like, about to really, really have a massive impact.
Especially when everyone's like, no one has the attention span. It has to be 10 seconds or 20 seconds. But yet there's podcasts that are 2 hours and 3 hours every episode, and they have millions of listeners.
Yeah, that's right. I would actually argue that the adoption of podcasting increasingly, particularly in this long format, is really kind of a reaction to the dumbing down by this corporate-owned and corporate-controlled media that is just trying to commodify human attention and has really, because of these screens, just reduced the ability of human beings to concentrate on anything into micro bites of time and communication. We use a sound bite culture. We use that phrase, and what was that Vine? 6 seconds. People would get bored of a boring Vine. A half second in, you start playing this and done. I'm done with it. So but one of my sheikhs, he called that micro ghafla. Technology, all this smartphone, social media, web-enabled world we're living in has now enabled micro ghafla. You can't even sit and take a dump and sit alone with your thoughts, just checking Facebook while sitting on the toilet. Like, we don't have any time alone with our own selves. No. Modern human beings, So these are all. So I would say that actually, the human heart, the needs of the human heart and the human soul and the human spirit have never changed. No. So the human being will find ways to try to seek balance, like water. It's going to try to find its, those human hearts that have not been completely sickened.
That reminds me.
As a result, I think podcasting is, it's about to. We're only in the first inning of podcasting.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I believe.
And everything, and especially like the medium of television where you had to sit and wait for a show to come on, and it had to be at a specific time, and you had to sit. It's
over. Yeah,
it's way over.
It's over,
no,
it's like a beeper.
Yeah, and they're trying to figure out how do we make people watch commercials, because that's
of course, that's
commercials
how they make the money.
Like you mentioned, like all of television, Hollywood, it's an
advertising platform.
It's an advertising platform.
That's it, bro.
And people know that.
People forget. It's so bizarre just to process this thought for a second. Like, there are 6 media conglomerates. They control all the TV studios, TV channels, all the film studios, basically, all the home video subsidiaries, all the book publishers, all the newspapers, all the magazines, all the book agents. The book publishing companies, all the billboard companies. It's basically 6 companies. Now, here's the thing. Those 6 companies, what is their product? What is it that they make money off? What do they sell? What do people buy and pay them for? Advertising. Television in particular. Their customers are advertisers, not people, not normal people. Their product is not the shows. Their product is ad space. That's what they sell. So they make all their money. The shows are completely incidental.
Yeah, the shows are commercials for the ads.
For the ads. The shows are commercials for. The shows they're not commercials though. They're the hook, man. They're the trick. They're the show to get you in to then show you the ad. But
the main show is the ad.
Exactly. That's right.
Like,
that's right. I mean, probably nowhere is this more grotesquely on display than the Super Bowl, right?
Hilarious.
It's like the game is the sideshow.
Yeah. And people are like, I want to watch that for their commercials. Yeah, they have great commercials.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's like the only time in the year where it's the truth of the whole medium is most blatantly on display. This whole thing exists. Oh, take a knee, blah, blah. Like, dude, this whole thing is just a subsidiary of this larger game that is at play, which is the commodification of human attention.
And even that just goes to show, like, people know it. All right, every ad, every like commercial, every billboard, all the stuff that's every pop up on your computer, it's constant, right? We see what, thousands of ads a day when you walk outside your house or when you sit at a screen inside your house. We all know that, but it still works because it makes them money. Like, they wouldn't. So people are tricked into purchasing things that they wouldn't have otherwise purchased. It's like dhikr of something. It's like constant dhikr.
Creating false desires.
It's just like, but isn't that's talking about the subconscious. If you just suggest something enough, people will.
That's the essence of advertising, bro. What you're describing. Advertising, marketing, public relations, like these fields.
Because we know with our conscious mind, all right, this commercial right now,
you know who Bernays
for a Big Mac, yeah. For a Big Mac, I know that it started off with like 6 dudes in like suits and ties sitting around a boardroom, like consulting the top, Harvard psychologists, like what sound should be playing when we show them the Big Mac that will activate the pituitary gland and remind them of their childhood urges.
It's not that methodical, right? Because this is the crazier thing, bro. The whole world of advertising is full of creatives.
Yep.
It would be like if you and I decided we're going to spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out how to sell ads to people, to represent big, gigantic, global Fortune 100 companies and make amazingly entertaining, musical, hilarious, ads.
With a dope punchline.
Exactly. And just get multi-million. You and I could start an advertising agency tomorrow. And by the way, what's interesting to me is, given that we live in this system, this is the advertising-dominated world in which we are all living. Google, Facebook, studio system, Hollywood. This is the world we live in. I'm not going to hate on an artist who makes a choice because they can either make movies or independent films or short films or TV shows, or they can make commercials. They decide to go to work for a big advertising agency, and they try to use that medium of ads, right? Because there's people making some very creative, clever ads and inspiring ads and all that, and they decided that they want to put their talent into that. Like, personally, that's not my cup of tea. That's not the lane I'm going to be in. But
I get it.
I get it, yeah. And by the way, it's both. It's they call them, I don't know if you know how much you know about advertising. I've learned a lot of this stuff recently, man. They call them copywriters. So those are the people who would otherwise be writing screenplays and TV shows and books and what have you. Instead, they get hired. They pursue the career of being a copywriter, or they're called art directors. People who would otherwise be visual artists or painters or pursue some other visual aspect of becoming a director, for example, directing films and TV shows. Instead, notice that a lot of great directors, when they're off on TV show, what do? They direct commercials. So it's the same skill set, man. It's the same people. And the talent that's required is the same. It's just that they're putting it towards, and it's 4 agencies, man. Back to the same thing of the consolidation of it all. It's just 4 gigantic advertising agencies that own all the subsidiaries that are controlling the world that we live in, man. It's a bizarre world we're living in. It's very ajib, man. When you just see it for what it really is. And Jerry Mander is one of my, do you know Jerry Mander? He wrote this book in 1978 called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. It's a dope book, dude. So he's still alive, by the way. Elderly guy now. And I actually always thought it was a fake name, Jerry Mander. Turns out he's a real guy. So he was an advertising executive for years. Last 5 years as a named partner at his own firm in San Francisco. And knows the TV and the ad business very well, quit it all, and wrote this book. And basically, spells out why he believes that television just fundamentally is an irredeemable medium, because it just exists to deliver ads. It is fundamentally inextricably linked to just the pushing a consumerist, materialist global worldview and agenda on behalf of a handful of advertisers who work, a few dozen major global advertisers work with 4 ad agencies to deliver ads on the platforms and the media outlets of 6 entities. And that's the world that we're living in. they manufacture idols, bro. How does a face end up on a cover of a magazine and a cover of?
But I do. I mean, I think you're right. There is a lot of creativity, but I also think these big ad agencies, they employ people that understand the subconscious and they understand the human mind because I mean they understand like our basic like primal urges for like status and like mating hierarchies and like how for a man it's like okay if I am seen as more dominant like ancient times like the role I have in the tribe gives me more access to the females to mate to pass on my genetic material.
Yes.
So you know what I mean. So then it's like Lexus, Mercedes, be the man or whatever. So like dude's like yeah, if I get that, like you know what I mean, then I'll have status in the society.
Yes.
And like for women, like the like biological, and of course we're more than just beasts, but we're also beasts. So for women, it's like, she's thinking about, subconsciously she's thinking about like, okay, what like my mate, who has a status in society. So my child, which I have this long-term commitment to, 9 months in the womb, plus like at least 12 years, I have to be devoted. I want to be protected on a biological level while I give birth, nurse, and raise this child. So the best means of protection is a man who is dominant in this society.
A man who has a Lexus.
Exactly, which is a symbol of that, right? Because it's respect and it's prestige, and you know what I mean.
Sure.
So and it's like, and then like all the sexuality.
Do you believe all that stuff though?
What?
Do you believe that's really what's going on there?
I believe that it's real, but I don't believe it's the whole story because we all animals, but we also have ruh and we have intellect and stuff like that. But this stuff's real. I mean, like sexual urges for a man. Like we're drawn to women with breasts and hips and like curves and stuff like that. That indicates at a subconscious level health and youth and vitality, right? A woman with like perky breasts, not sagging ones.
Fertility.
You see what I'm saying? Exactly, because she's young, she can bear children. The wide hips, the breasts, she can nurse children. Like it's not dudes are not thinking about that. Like, oh man, she can nurse my baby. Like it's like no, but on a subconscious level. And same with women being being drawn to men who are strong with like muscles and like this type of build. Because it has to do with protection. You can protect my infant child while I nurse it, for all these years. So yeah, that stuff's real, bro. I mean, we're animals.
Yeah, of course.
We're hayawan and native. We're not just animals.
We're more than animals.
But
no, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, when you start getting into all this like archetypal femininity, archetypal masculinity, to me, I'm immediately just like, this whole discourse is fundamentally under attack.
Yeah,
they would dismiss a lot of what we're talking about as gender binary assumptions. And the gender fluidity movement and the transgenderism movement today are fundamentally trying to sort of call into question and really, I would say, essentially constitute an assault on this whole worldview.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, and
I don't know how this ends. I mean, I think back to chaos. I think that so long as there is widespread epistemic crisis on Earth. People don't know what.
And that's the essence of postmodernism, is that all the stories, all the overarching narratives are wrong.
Correct.
The only overarching narrative is that there are no overarching narratives.
Correct. Complete subjectivity.
Yes.
Radical skepticism.
Right. So,
which is basically a type of nihilism or nihilism, which is basically, kind of become the default.
I heard you say something that relates to this on, I think it was a Diffuse Congruence podcast, and you mentioned that you felt like the comedians are kind of like the theologians of the day, or like they're kind of like public intellectuals in a sense, or public thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Like they play a role. If you think, I always try to like think of things in like primal ancestral terms, but like, the comedians are exploring ideas and concepts and the meaning of life and all these type of things in ways that are funny. And I thought you said some interesting things about that. And how, but you also mentioned that the dominant comedians are like usually atheist, nihilist, kind of like what there's no purpose to this all.
Correct.
And it just that's kind of like a dark humor associated with it.
Yes. It's like white magic and dark magic with black magic we were talking about, Same thing. It's almost like there's the same thing with comedy. There's dark comedy and light comedy, And so much of it comes down to intentionality. One of the things that irks me the most, man, about the cultural conversation around stand-up these days, which often, like the most common time you'll see stand-up and the comments of a stand-up comedian kind of bubble over and become a subject of the popular discourse in the news and in the culture is when a comedian sort of gets in trouble for supposedly crossing some line, for example, or being offensive, quote unquote. Right. And I say all the quote unquote because to me, what all of those conversations, every single one that I've seen so far, whether it's use of the N-word, whether it's attempt to do rape jokes, attempt to do abortion jokes, attempt to do trans jokes, attempt to do jokes about gay culture and gay subculture, a lot of jokes about race and gender and stuff like that. These are naturally sensitive, triggering subject matters. I get it. What often happens when you find a comedian, not always, but often happens when you find a comedian, quote unquote, getting in trouble for something they said, such as on Twitter or on, a comment or even at a live show. Never have I seen in the aftermath a real and sincere conversation, in my judgment, about trying to ascertain the intent. Mm-hmm. What people are more willing to do is say, intent is irrelevant. You're not allowed to do X. You're not allowed to say Y. And while I understand sometimes where they're coming from, okay, I'm an empathetic person, I get where they're coming from. I think trying to critique speech, any speech, and I say this as a proponent of free speech, almost like not an absolute proponent, but I'm heavily influenced by free speech culture and First Amendment culture. As a former attorney and a comedian, an American. And a goddamn American. The importance of that truly as it being a cornerstone of a truly free society, an attempt to live and create a truly free society is absolutely an ingenious legal mechanism. Yeah. So I'm all for that. That being said, intent in lived reality and real human experience trumps everything. If your best friend, this is where the cliche, like my best friend is black, comes from. So if your best friend is black, then you may have jokes that you do with your black friend if you're not black that is so intimate and the intent is known that it's cool between the two of you. But no, I'll take it out of that context. You don't have that license to do that. Sure. Well, that phenomenon, well, why do people even say that in the first place? Because it is also true, it is also real that intent is important. Never have I seen a comedian, you know what I mean, like be given the benefit of the doubt or having a real investigation as to what was going on there. What do they mean by that? What's the real intent? It's almost always like they say something, it gets, it's deemed inflammatory, it causes some controversy, and then they immediately are forced to sort of try to put out the fire by backing out, apologizing, blah, blah, blah. Because I think that this is a mistake, we're not making space in our culture for satire, for more room for satire, for irony, for being sarcastic, and all of those are facets of it. Now that being said, look, free speech should never be understood to mean you get to say whatever you want to say with no implication.
Right. You can't incite violence. You can't fire in a crowded theater.
Right. No, but not even that. Those are like the black and white limits on free speech. I'm talking about this idea of like, where's my free speech rights? As if you should be able to say anything, no matter how inflammatory and offensive, and there should be no reaction, right? But the point of free speech is that, you have the right to say anything, and the people will respond, and they have the right to respond however they want, so long as it's not violence. Right. And so, we're getting sidetracked here.
No, but I think this is important, and I think it's interesting that comedians, in the modern, like the last few years, is particularly comedians who are mostly like left-leaning on the political spectrum are like on the forefront pushing back against this like PC culture, social justice warrior, even though they, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's funny because comedians are like, we reserve the right to make fun of whatever. So like it's interesting. And what's interesting too is like, you know, like UC Berkeley, all these like right wing, like clowns, most of them, who are like just their whole goal, Milo Yiannopoulos and stuff, like their whole goal is to just get a rise of people.
They're just cultural trolls.
And these fools on the left, like go and like tear stuff up and go, you know what I mean? And like go, you know, like it's like start rise and stuff. It's just like, you're just giving this dude exactly what he wants, which is attention. Like he's just a marketing machine. Like he's just an advertiser. Like he's like, what will get the best, you know, the most clicks on my whatever. And again, there seems to be this loss, this of idea of conversation where we can actually discuss issues. It's just like lowest common denominator.
Back to reductionism. We live in a reductionist culture of reductionist messaging. You know, the modern world is waging a war on nuance.
And I think the idea that you can never tell a joke about, you know, abortion or, you know, these type of things, which is a touchy subject, no doubt. But like, I thought Louis C.K., how he opened his most recent special on abortion. Like, I thought that was really nuanced, actually, what he did. Because he goes, it's either killing a baby or whatever, you know what I mean? And then he was like talking about people picketing, and he goes, of course, they think it's killing a baby. Like and you're mad at them for picketing? Like, that was dope. Like, he's really like bringing out, like, it's either, you know, like defecating, like, oh, no big deal. It's just like removing some bodily function, or it's killing a baby. And so those are very different paradigms. And if you hold one of them, you should understand why the other is going to come to a different conclusion than you. You know what I mean? And so I think like that's, okay, some people would say you shouldn't joke about abortion, but I think he actually was making a profound point that like helps elucidate or illuminate some of the conversation. It like helps you reflect on it in a deeper way. You know?
Yes.
But the other thing,
but this was a branch of comedians being sort of these theologians, modern philosophers, basically. You know, that was just been my observation, is that, you know, if it is true, and I think it is, that every age in human civilization, recorded human history, has had some discernible philosophical underpinnings, then it is no secret that the age we're in right now is basically a scientism-driven, materialism-driven, skepticism-fueled, almost like agnostic, borderline, outright atheistic age. And I think if you heard that podcast, I think I talked about before that, and I know that you're knowledgeable about the writings of the so-called perennialist school, but they spend a fair amount of time talking about the distinction between capital T traditionalism and capital M modernism. So my point in all this is to say that modernism, capital M modernism, the philosophical school that has as its starting point that what we take to be real is material reality, and what we take to be, the domain of philosophical inquiry is whether there's a God and meaning and a soul and blah, blah, blah. They've got it exactly inverted, for traditional human beings, and that was the case for all of human civilization, across all of human culture and societies, across all of human history, was the exact opposite starting point. Like, of course there's a God, of course there's a higher power, of course there's a greater world beyond this physical space and matter. And the real philosophical question is this really happening? Mm-hmm. Are we in the Matrix? Are we in the simulation that Elon Musk believes we're in? Or they were already talking about this, right? So I think that the comedians, being the so-called theologians or the philosophers of the day, is simply to say that they are the ones who are most explicitly articulating through their jokes and their work today this modernistic worldview, giving illustration after illustration, example after example of how the world is sort of caught in this worldview, and most notably when they talk about religion, when they talk about God, when they talk about atheism and critique, quote unquote, again, religion. And they have a point, fake religion, man. One of the amazing things to me about Islam, in particular, among the world religions, and I'm not a scholar of religion by any means. I'm not extensively studied in other wisdom traditions, but I will say this: it is absolutely clear to me that Islam stands unique among global world religions, quote unquote, because it has within its own methodological structure and pedagogical framework of how to preserve its own distilled, authentic teachings, a built-in mechanism that acknowledges fake religion, made-up bullshit, which we call bid'ah. Bid'ah in Islamic law is basically the acknowledgement, like, yo, there's going to be some bullshit that creeps up. People do this. They've always done this. They're going to do this. The job of the real scholars and the saints and the people who care about preserving true mystical, spiritual wisdom teaching from the messenger of God bear the responsibility to, from time to time, pare away all the weeds and cut out all the BS. That is an incredible acknowledgement of a religion
and
about the nature of religion.
Said that there will be a mujaddid, a reviver in every 100 years, which means every 100 years, a lot of people lose the plot. So somebody needs to revive that joint.
Exactly right.
You know what I mean? It's this idea, and
the importance of converts in the history of Islam for this exact reason.
A view from the edge, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know about this, what's his name? Richard Bullitt, The Case for Islamo Civilization. Yeah. He wrote that one as well. What's it called?
A View from the Edge.
A View from the Edge.
Which is about that, how
phenomenon, from the edge, the new converts come. Yeah. They overwhelm, basically, the center, which tends to get stultified and reified and gets just, all this...
Which is interesting. You see not only the worldly power, that's one thing, but the kind of intellectual and spiritual and literary scholarly dominance within the Islamic world passes from the Arabs very quick to the Persians. I mean, it goes, and then it goes to the Turks, it goes to the Indians, it goes to the
Persians,
West Africans, the Spanish. Okay, let's talk about Europe. The Africa, North Africa, West Africa, East Africa. Hadramaut, Southeast. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
It's incredible, yeah. So the fact that the potato, it's a hot potato, man. And the fact that it's being in front of our eyes passed on to the West, quote unquote.
Right.
That is precisely what is at the heart of all this tension and so-called clash of civilizations. I would say the clash of civilizations theory, forwarded by Samuel Huntington, is an interesting theory, but the lived reality is not a clash of civilizations, but rather a synthesis of cultures. That's actually what's happening on the ground. This idea of Muslims in Europe, why can't they indigenize? Why can't they be... It's like, dude, the mayor of London is a Muslim. What the hell are you talking about? The 10% of London are Muslims right now. Muhammad is the most popular name in the UK.
Curry is the official dish.
Exactly.
But, I mean, this...
And that's not to completely dismiss. Actually, right. I think that the truth is always kind of in the middle.
Sure.
You can take an extreme view on anything, but the truth is in the middle. Is there a clash? Completely no. Is there a total synthesis? No. What's happening is a very organic process of mutual acculturation, identities being negotiated in real time in the real world. I would say that, our experience as American Muslims in this particular time that we're in is, about the most interesting kind of cultural unfoldment happening on the planet. And in many ways, may or may not carry the key and the secret to unlock a continuation of the species. Otherwise, we could be looking at a very quick burnout here. You know what I mean? Because so much of the technology, of the science-driven tech in our world today is as amazing as it is, as marvelous as it is, as mind-bending as it is sadly ungrounded. It's untethered. It's not grounded in capital T truth. And in that sense, it's dangerous and in many ways suicidal.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, we forget. It's like Dr. Omar said at this retreat, ideas have consequences. Ideas have consequences. And what you believe about the nature of reality affects how you interface with quote unquote reality. Mm-hmm. What you believe about the creation of the cosmos affects how you're going to interact with the planet Earth. Like whether you believe that you know trees and fish and all these things are commodities to fulfill our needs, or whether they're living loci of the manifestation of divine names
Allah.
to be respected with rights that are living, that have
Correct.
a portion of consciousness themselves. It's like that's going to affect how you interface with the world.
Of course, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's people think, oh, the only reason that we're destroying the earth now and not before is because they didn't have the technology. It's like, no, maybe they didn't have the technology because they didn't look at the world through the same paradigm. Correct. You know what I mean? They didn't have the same underpinnings.
Yes. MashaAllah. Some of these topics are obviously never ending, right? Oceanic subjects. But comedy to me ultimately is a beautiful art form. I love stand-up as a specific art form or craft. I think it's just a really amazing medium, a genre of communication, and I've fallen increasingly in love with it the longer I've been doing it, and the more great comics I've had the chance to learn from and watch and really study, it's just made me more and more passionate about like, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to find my lane, and figure out how I want to do this thing. I still don't know. I'm not gonna front and be like, I feel like I've got it all worked out. I feel like I'm very much a work in progress. I feel like my stand-up has definitely gotten more authentic over time. I would say it's probably in the best place it's been. In some ways, I kind of long to go back to being as free and comfortable as it was in the very beginning. It's like this weird relationship between natural ability and skill that you develop by working on, refining your talent. So there's raw talent on the one hand, there's refined skill on the other, and there's this weird, thing that happens, I think, in any field where if you have a lot of good raw, just original talent, organic talent, there's some stuff you'll do early on that you can't even explain how you were able to do it. But then the more you learn the technical craft of it all, it almost becomes difficult to ever access again that organic talent until you've kind of come out on the other end. And that process can take a lifetime,
Right. It's like beginner's mind.
Yeah, man.
Trying to cultivate beginner's mind.
Beginner's mind, is that what it's called?
Yeah, they talk about that. Like the Buddhists talk about that and stuff. No, yeah. You hear it in different things, but I think, and it's like archery too, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the flow.
Yeah.
I've heard it as a baseball example, the swinging a bat, like a great baseball player, as a kid, just has this free swing that is just like picture perfect, and then spends 20 years trying to master the craft of the game to eventually be able to one day swing as freely as he did when he was 6 years old.
Which is, I mean, it's similar to like the idea of, okay, so, I don't know, everyone's path to comedy, I'm sure, is different, but I think it would probably be like a pretty archetypal path that you're the funny kid in school, you make everybody laugh, and people are like, you're funny, dude, and you realize, oh, this is my thing. Like, I may not be the fastest or the strongest or the best with girls, but I'm funny, dude, and that, like, you know what I mean? Like, people, you know what I mean? So then you cultivate that, and then, people are like, dude, you should be a comedian, you're funny, and you're like, oh, maybe I could do that. So then you're just naturally funny. There's certain people that they're just hilarious. Like, they got that. Like, it's a gift. And then, but imagine you're that dude, and then you're like, okay, I could be a comedian. You stand up on stage. Like, for sure you're going to bomb. Because, one, like, you're naturally funny, but you're in a totally unnatural setting. Now you're just standing with just people staring at you and a microphone and lights in your eyeballs, and you're like...
And the worst part about the setup is there's an expectation of laughter.
Exactly.
See, one of the things that a funny person has going for them without an off stage is just that there's no expectation for them to be funny. There's no pressure on them to be funny.
Right.
They're just being funny because they're engaging their clown and they're having fun.
Right.
And the moment that the context is switched up, and it's like, oh, now we're going to stand you in front of a room, in front of a microphone with lights on you, and everybody's sitting in the room quietly waiting for you to hear what you have to say because you're supposed to make them laugh.
Right.
Not a lot of beginners can deliver under those circumstances.
Right.
If you can, you're a natural, and you'll probably progress very quickly.
Right.
If you can do it consistently.
But it seems like the goal, which takes discipline and time, probably months and years, is to get to a place where you're as comfortable on stage as you are when you're just chilling with your boys in the schoolyard, making people laugh. So it's like you have to cultivate that beginner's mind, that you have to get back to naturalness.
Correct.
In an unnatural 100%. Setting.
That's right. In fact, they say that, the goal is to eventually be as comfortable in front of, 50,000 people in a stadium on stage as you are in front of 5,000 in a theater, as you are in front of 500 in a club, as comfortable as you are in front of 5 people in a living room. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no difference. You're making 5 people laugh in the living room, or you're making 50,000 laugh in a stadium. Nothing changes. Maybe the performance is amped up a little bit for a big, stadium crowd and this jumbotron. So you're going to have to make some adjustments in terms of performance and delivery and timing and sound considerations, blah, blah, blah. But the level of energetically, right, what you're bringing to the stage, how comfortable you are, how confident you are. They're like, yo, I got jokes. I know this stuff works. I know it's hilarious, and I know I'm hilarious. So,
and that must be a lot of it, because you have to have confidence, but you also have to deliver. But what's a trip about any type of performance is, when you're killing, when you're winning, when you're crushing it, people are giving you control of their mind and saying, okay, I'll be like a passenger in this, like, just drive. You know what I mean? Yes. And then when you're winning, like, they're like, this is fun. Like, I'm on your ride, dude, and you're killing, and like, this is fun. This is so fun. But when you like make a wrong turn,
crash, man,
and they're like, oh, I want to get out, and then you lost, like like just in that moment,
you lose the crowd, yeah.
But when you're on, it's like magical. It's just like
yeah, of course.
It's like
that's the drug that every entertainer is kind of chasing, I think, in a sense, right? Yeah. Every performer is chasing, especially for live performance, right? There's nothing like that experience. As everybody who does the thing that we do knows, there's just no substitute for it.
Thank you for listening to Path and Present Podcast. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a few ways. One is word of mouth. People hear about the podcast mostly from people like you who listen and like it and say, I know someone who would connect with this, or who would feel this, or who would enjoy this subject matter. So continue to share with your family and friends. Secondly, you can subscribe, rate, and comment on the iTunes page of Path and Present. Subscribing means that the podcast each episode will come directly to you when we release it. And rating and commenting means that it will grow and come up in the iTunes rankings, which will allow it to be available and seen by more people. And then lastly, you can support financially on Patreon. Patreon is a site which allows people to give a small amount monthly to support art or any type of content. And we have a Path and Present page on Patreon. The link is on our SoundCloud page, SoundCloud/Path and Present. And you'll find the Patreon link there. And yeah, you can support there, and we're greatly appreciative of it. I guess lastly, keep us in your prayers, your positive thoughts, and your moments of remembrance. And thank you for tuning in and being part of the global Path and Present family. One love.